So I've suggested the theme of hats and shoes, which I hope you feel you can interpret in all sorts of ways. And I illustrated the email with some paintings by Wayne Thiebaud and Avigdor Arica. And there's quite an interesting contrast between them, I think, because Wayne Thiebaud is interested particularly in sort of shops, retail, the way in which these desirable objects are displayed, shoes, ice creams, ties. Avigdor Arica finds his compositions just accidentally. They haven't been set up. They're very often objects around his house, either in Paris, where he has a studio, or Tel Aviv in Israel. So I'm going to start in that way. We've got various pairs of shoes that have just been lined up by the door and around that I'll show you. So I'll start with shoes that are not arranged for painting, at least. So these shoes here are by the door, under the radiator. And actually it occurred to me, because most of the shoes are dark, it might work quite well to work with black paper. So I've been I drew out some of the shapes of the shoes, lined up in pairs, with some charcoal, because if you do have black paper, you don't have to have black paper, but this is just one of the possibilities. Black paper actually isn't that dark if you have black sugar paper, so you can draw on it with charcoal. But equally, what's very satisfying is to take some colour. So in this case, I'm looking at the colour of the floorboards, and I'm looking at the negative shape around those shoes and finding them partly by defining them from their outside. So I think anything that you can do sort of technically with choice of materials, an approach which simplifies your process, is definitely to be considered. So apart from the fact that these shoes are sort of naturally arranged, and I suppose they look, what's their narrative? They're almost set up. They're waiting to go somewhere. I also like the fact that the view that I've got here is looking down into them, so they're a little bit confusing to draw, and therefore, if I can make the drawing work, it'll probably be a bit more intriguing. So there's different possibilities there. They're naturally arranged, got an interesting viewpoint, and I'm trying to work with not the obvious shape, and I've not outlined everything. I've tried to begin with the negative shape and see what develops out of that. And also we've got a stray lace down here, which is quite nice. Laces are always interesting, and we've got a pair of boots at the end there that need some laces. Do laces last? I hope you'll consider that. So if I put these laces in, see what that does to that. And they're under the radiator, so I might need to do something to bring it all together up here. I need to get a little bit of colour up there. So that's one possibility, working with black paper. We've got yet more shoes outside the door, so I'll move on to them. So out in our stairwell we have yet more shoes in a rack here. So if I set up something like this, I might be able to show you. If I thought I could do here. So again, I've got some black paper, and they're sitting on a white shelf. Most of them are dark. So I've just really begun with that same approach. Just trying to do the spaces between the shoes. So you don't have to have black paper, but it is quite nice to be able to work with black paper. If you don't and you like this idea, then just paint some black paper with watercolour or ink. Get some fairly robust paper and put a wash over it. And actually it'll take the chalk very nicely. So that's got a bit of perspective. I think if I was to paint this, I wouldn't necessarily do the whole thing, and I wouldn't worry too much about this, well, about this looking down view. So first I might just build up some of the lighter bits, because then I can actually suggest some of the shadows cast by the individual shoes. That one sticks out, so that's quite nice. So I haven't had to arrange these at all, they're just arranged naturally. Then it could actually go on with the chalk. You could actually start to find some of the lighter parts in the middles. Or I could just go on to some charcoal. So they're very dark, and that's great, this one that sticks out here. It's about to fall off. And then those are a bit brown, that's a bit blue. Didn't bring any blue. They are brown. So again, as I said with the previous drawing, it's quite nice if you don't have to arrange things, and if you have a way of working where you can do less, and so you can be more conscious, not of trying to draw things correctly, but of actually trying to bring out some kind of atmosphere, some kind of narrative, the things that we've talked about when we've been reviewing your work and saying, what's the painting about? What are you trying to convey? What's the message? And if you've not got to do so much to actually capture your subject, you can then begin to consider what you want people to see, what will the narrative or the atmosphere that you're trying to create. Like there. And of course, if you work with black paper, you can also, I've left my rubber inside, but you can actually cut back into the drawing in order to get back to the black. You can either apply black or you can subtract to get the black, but the one I really like is this one in here. So that's something, if I'm looking for something to emphasize, it could be this single shoe sticking out. So that's another possibility. So one more possibility here, just found composition. The old guy's boots, and then the Go Fast trainers of the younger generation. So let's come out a bit so you can see. So I made a start on this. I'll do a bit more. And they were, this is how they've been left. These sensibly lined up in a tidy way, and these thrown to the floor with little regard. But that means we can really see the kind of go fast shape of them. Sometimes notice there's quite a correspondence between car design. If you look at sports cars and compare them with trainers, I think it's the same sort of work going on. So I've been working with a little bit of charcoal to get those shapes. And so this time we've got a side view of the trainers, but we're looking down into the boots. So I'm just doing this on off-white sugar paper. I'm working with a bit of charcoal first, and then I would put colour into those, such as it is. I've got some blue trainers. So there could be a narrative there to do with the wearers of the shoes. Hugo van Gogh's paintings of his boots, I think they were his boots, they're kind of self-portraits really, or they're certainly portraits of the wearers. So there's possibilities there if you want to think of narrative. What on earth is the narrative in a pair of shoes? Well, it could be a kind of portrait of those that occupy the shoes. Should I have a lighter one? So there, I'm just going for boots at the moment, but I would want to put the shoes, I would want to put them in some sort of context, possibly just with the floor. And then I could also put some work with the shadows. I've got to decide, do I want the carpet or not? But certainly I want to bring them together, and I'd be quite keen to get those to cast some sort of shadow. So we're good on shoes in this house, we're not quite so good on hats. But I've got a few that I'm now arranging, thought of Degas Milliners. We haven't got hat stands, but I'm just hanging them off angle poises and cans of hairspray. So there's some possibility there. Got to look at it from different angles. Do I like them from above, where they make these ellipses? Well, I quite like looking through them. Again, these hats could potentially be portraits, characters interacting a little bit. So I would explore them from different viewpoints. I'm quite keen on looking against the light, but if we come in a different direction, we might get something else, get them to overlap. I'm keener on the shoes, have to admit. But this I have to try. That's better. Now that's much better. So I'm using my camera to find a composition, the way you might use a viewfinder, but you might find actually we're getting more and more used to working with cameras and technology. You might actually find you can do a lot of composing. So I think somewhere around there, I like it when there are these dark shapes. And I'd probably, if I hadn't run out of black paper, I'd start with black paper. Okay, so I'm going to pause now because I've got to look at what I've got. I might do a drawing of this. I'll look at everything that I've got, and then I'm going to start a painting. So I came to the conclusion I wasn't trying hard enough with hats, and I owed it to you to make more of an effort. So I found some more hats that Inez made. felt and whatever that's called, wicker basket or straw, that's what it is, it's called straw. So I've arranged them, I've just put them on top of, I haven't got hat stands, but I just made some hat stands just to show you can do this too, if you want to. And then I've just done a drawing in charcoal and pastel, and I don't know where this is going yet. I do know that I wanted these circular hats tilted in different directions, a kind of cascade of ellipses and circles. And at the moment, really all I've been trying to do with my drawing is I'm trying to draw them well. I'm trying to get them to be angled and pick up on some of their colours and their characteristics. As I do that, they become, the policeman becomes a bit official. The red hat becomes more sort of wedding glamorous, and this hat becomes a bit more Indiana Jones. So maybe something will develop, I don't know. But what I'm going to do finally, so I'm telling you I don't know quite where I'm going with this, but I'm using just firstly some observation. I'm trying to make them look like what they are. I've arranged them in a particular way. And now when I start painting, because one of the things I did, I don't know whether you can see this, but I was working on off-white paper. So as I drew the hats and refined them, I put on some white chalk, again a bit like what I was doing with the black paper. I'm working with a negative shape to refine them. So that, I think, often gives you quite an interesting effect. And I would like to put that to work in the painting. So partly because I'm painting over an old painting, and partly because I like that idea, I've covered my painting with my canvas with some mid-darkish tone grey, and I'm now going to draw in with some black, and then I might bring some white in around these shapes to see if that generates some ideas. So I'm trying to use the technique to help me find something that I can then go further with. So as I said, I felt I knew where I was going with the shoes. I'm still a bit uncertain with the hats, so I'm just using this process to see if I can find something. So the canvas has got wet grey on it. I'm now putting on some black, so it will mix, and that's quite helpful because it means that nothing I do will be too permanent or too definite. I'll have to make changes, and out of all that, maybe I'll start to get a feel for what I can do with this subject. So that's kind of bad planning maybe, because it doesn't fit on. But will it turn out to be useful? Let's see. I mean, I can always rub it all off again, but I probably won't, because I just want to go a bit further with this process to be helpful to you. So I want to get that right. The check on the policeman's helmet is blooming annoying. Okay, so the way that's progressing, the large straw hat is getting pushed off. Now, I don't know if that's good or bad. Possibly bad, but anyway. I'm going to stick with that for now. I think really if I was going to spend longer on this, I think I would just rub them out and move them up. But I think it's more useful to you if I go on considering some other steps, why I would take them. So I've said there's a sort of cascade of circles and ellipses. That's one thing that I'm interested in. I also position myself looking into the light. So I think there's a certain amount of contrast which appeals to me. So I'm just filling in a few dark areas just to get a sense of that light. I've still got to decide what to do about the background or the setting. But for the time being, to sort of join up with some of the other things that I've been doing, I've basically taken some white paint on my bit of card, and I'm just going to block in the spaces between my hats. Spaces between as a way of refining them. And let's just see what happens. So I'm staying in monochrome. Nothing's happened yet. I think it will make a difference once I get some colour on. Because, colour-wise, we've got mainly just the red hat, really. Everything else is fairly subdued, a little bit more neutral. So I think it's not until we get the red hat on that something will happen with the colours. And it won't just be the red. It won't just be that there's red there. It'll be the way that the red influences the other colours. With my mid-tone ground, the straw hat and the Indiana Jones hat and the black hat all won't change hugely when I put colour onto them, but the red hat, well, it's funny actually, when I put the white around the red hat, it did actually make a bit of a difference. I thought it started to make things happen. So I'll pause a second, mix up a bit of red, put some red and maybe some straw, see what that does. So a bit of colour onto the red hat and the straw hat. See what that does. I'm using the brush, I'm not sure why, but trying to float on some of that light. See what that does. I think actually my white background is probably just too strong. It's taking over. I'll get a bit of straw colour onto some of the lighter areas. So this bit of the hat there. See that? Also the sun's coming in and out, so a bit of a change. Straw there. Maybe I'll just use a bit on here. Maybe mix it in slightly. Yeah, well, actually when I do that, you can see the white is too much. So perhaps the thing to do is a bit of scraping down, which, as you know, softens things. So I might carefully scrape down around here, so I don't have quite so much. Maybe mix that in a little bit. Might be worth, rather than a white background, trying a greyer one. So I'm just trying to do things unrehearsed in front of you so that it gives you some ideas. I was clear about what I wanted to do with the shoes. I could see all sorts of relationships between them and narratives and nice arrangements. Whereas here I've arranged the hats myself, and that at the moment that's still not giving me a clear idea of what I'm after. You know, this scraping back is quite helpful. Each of those hats is a bit more interesting, but there's no connection between them. I mean, thinking of Degas' stripy wallpaper, you know, maybe I need to introduce some sort of pattern to the background which connects them. That might help a bit. But I'm still not really clear what I'm after here. So I need a bit of time. But I hope that I've illustrated some ways in which you could proceed, some ways that are useful to you. I've just seen one more thing. It's just the top of that policeman's helmet. When the sun comes out, it's quite pronounced. It just makes me think it's more significant than I've made it, but that isn't making any difference. Lighten it slightly. No, now I need to darken the rest of the helmet. Anyway, I would certainly, one thing I would pursue with this would be the light. When the light comes out, each of these hats comes to life, but I've overdone the background, and getting rid of some of that white would definitely be a good move. Just to rub it back a bit might help. So I've tried to show you some possibilities. I've suggested the theme hats and shoes. Some of the versions of shoes that I've worked with have been accidental compositions, just the way they've been left by the door. Some relationships between shoes of different people. Maybe there's some characters associated with those shoes that can be portrayed through how you paint them. And then I've had a bit of a go with hats. So it's over to you. I hope that you've got enough around, and play around with arranging things or trying to see if you can chance upon things that have arranged themselves. I did some drawing and now I'm doing a bit of painting, so you should see what suits you. And perhaps when we meet tomorrow, we can look at some of your sketches and discuss what you want to go on to do. And hopefully, again, this will tie in with what we've discussed. I've discussed with some of you, not all of you yet, a sort of review of the work that you've done, the things that you might want to pursue. So having a still life or even a figurative subject like this can hopefully be a good way of that hopefully you can connect it with some of the things that we've identified together about what interests you and how you like to work. Okay, well, see you tomorrow, or soon. No, tomorrow.